Thank you for joining us at Continual, the never-ending convention. My name is Jean Marie Ward, and I will be your host tonight for the writing track panel. Oh my God, fictional ghosts. With me today to discuss ghosts, both fictional and maybe some haunting real stories too, are four wonderful authors: Colleen Gleason, Alexia Gordon, Gail Z and Amy Ravenell.
Hi.
Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have you. We're going to start off letting y'all introduce yourself and your writing. So just got to take it alphabetical because I'm lazy. Colleen, kick it off.
Thanks. I write a series called the Wicks Hollow books, and this is the first book in the series. It's called Sinister Summer. They are a series of what I call like a modern Gothic romance mystery. So it's a mixture of mystery, romance, and ghosts. Yes. So there's a murder, there's a real ghost, and there's a romance. So it's all set in the same small town where there's an abnormal number of murders and an abnormal amount of ghosts. So it's kind of like Murder, She Wrote with a rom-com story and a lot of ghosts. So that's the series that I'm mostly going to talk about tonight. In each of my books is a real, actual ghost. And I guess we're going to talk more about what those ghosts are later, but that's the basic. I write a bunch of other things as well, some historical mystery and some other things, but this is the series I'm really having a blast with right now.
Cool. Alexia?
I write the Gethsemane Round series. This is the fifth book in the series, Execution in E. It's under the cozy mystery banner. The specific subgenre would be paranormal cozy. So it's mystery with a ghost in it, which is what makes it paranormal. So actually not unlike Murder, She Wrote with the ghost without the rom-com. So we have something in common.
Cool. Gail?
Hi, I'm Gail Z and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, steampunk, and more. And as Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. There are ghosts in pretty much all of our series, and they play a major role, sometimes as a witness, sometimes as an informant, and sometimes as a badass fighter in the midst of the action. So they stay pretty busy.
Cool. Amy?
Hi, I'm Amy Ravenell, and I'm the baby writer, I guess. I'm on my first series right now, which is the Restless Spirit series with Falstaff Books. And the first one is White Spirit, and it looks backwards on there, but it's a White Spirit. And it follows a group of paranormal investigators who go around and solve mysteries and fall in love, and each one focuses on a member of the group.
Okay, cool. That's great. I'm going to ask you all, how did you get interested in ghosts? I mean, have you ever personally experienced hauntings? Did you seek them out because they were cool? Amy?
Well, I really liked the Ghost Hunter show on Sci-Fi. And one of my best friends is Tally Johnson, and he's very big on telling ghost stories. So I heard a lot of ghost stories from him, pretty much. But as far as like seeking ghosts out, I'm a big weenie, so I could never actually ghost hunt. It would terrify me too much.
Okay. Colleen?
Well, I grew up reading Nancy Drew and watching Scooby-Doo and reading the Three Investigators series. So I have always liked mysteries with a paranormal or supernatural element in them, even though the Scooby-Doo and the Nancy Drew stories all turned out to not have real ghosts. But I also started reading Barbara Michaels and Elizabeth Peters when I was a couple decades younger than I am now, and fell in love with the mixture of romance, mystery, and real ghosts, because I do believe that ghosts exist. I believe there's a different plane. I believe in all sorts of metaphysical. And unfortunately, I haven't actually had any ghostly experiences my own. I'm not exactly sure whether I want to. I'm kind of like might be like Amy, a little bit, nervous about that. But at the same time, I totally believe they exist, and I also believe that they often can have a purpose. So that's kind of how I incorporated ghosts, because that's what I wanted to read and what I like to read. And there aren't very many stories that I've been able to find that have this mixture the way I like it, of a third ghost, a third murder, and a third romance. So
Okay. Alexia?
I think Colleen and I must actually be like the same person.
but you
I
said you don't have romance in yours. I have hot sex in my
He
books.
has romance.
Oh,
Mine has romance
It's just
too.
a slow burn.
Oh, I have hot sex. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
But I also grew up on Nancy Drew and Scooby-Doo with some Agatha Christie and Stephen King thrown into the mix just for good measure. My mother actually loves the romance, and so I think that's actually why I didn't like it, because I was like rebelling. So if she was a romance fan, I of course had to not like it. But we both love mystery and Stephen King, so I think I'm slowly turning into my mother.
Aren't we all? Oh.
So that's, I mean, that's how I got interested in ghost. I mean, I grew up reading ghost stories and watching scary movies on late night TV. You know, in the summer when I didn't have to get up for school, my parents would basically let me stay up until they were leaving the house to go to work in the morning watching. This is back in the day before cable, so it was always like, you know, channel 32 that you could barely get the signal in if you wiggled the antenna the right way. Watching some, you know, 1950s horror movie with, you know, Vincent Price or something. And you know, and I also love mystery, so I personally have not had any paranormal experiences, although I do always go on the ghost tour for whatever city I happen to be in. But according to my mother, and I didn't find this out until I was basically grown, my grandparents on her side have had paranormal experiences. So that kind of made me go from, you know, it's just all good fun in, you know, in fiction to, well, you know, my grandparents were very sober-minded, religious, you know, country people, not given to flights of fancy. So if they had some experience, maybe there, you know, there must be something to it, because they wouldn't, you know, they wouldn't make it up. So.
Yeah. Gail?
You know, I fell in love with ghosts watching Dark Shadows as a preschooler. I don't know what my mother was thinking letting me watch it as a preschooler, but I did, and I blame everything on that. Ghosts, vampires, werewolves, really haven't moved much from that. Also loved Nancy Drew and Scooby-Doo, and Alfred Hitchcock and the Three Investigators, and all of those. Anything spooky like that was really what I was looking for. And when I was about 10, I bought a book of regional ghost stories when we were on vacation, and fell in love because these were all the stories that were the urban legends of the area where we had gone camping. And I read that book until the cover fell off of it. And even to this day, whenever we go to a new area, I'll go find a book of regional ghost stories in some gift shop somewhere, because I want to know what goes on there. I also do the ghost tours anywhere. You know, my family knows that I will drag them to cemeteries, crypts, haunted places, antique stores that sell funeral hair, you know, wreaths and things like that. I'll find it if it's in, you know, 100 miles. So yeah, all that spooky stuff has always been just what called to me. You know, I have always said I don't think I have a psychic bone in my body. I had one kind of strange experience, but it doesn't compare to what people who really see ghosts see. But I've always attracted people as friends who do seem to have quite a sensitivity. So go figure, I just write about it.
Okay, so basically you all love it, but no personal experiences that drove you to write about them, except your love and affection. Oh, Colleen.
I do have a friend who I'm very close to, who I trust implicitly, kind of like you trust your grandparents, Alexia, who has had several ghostly experiences. And I won't get into them because that's not what the table's about. But truly, so that just helped heighten my belief. So not directly, but subdirectly. So
right.
Okay. You know, ghosts come in a lot of different shapes and sizes and forms, you know, and they are categorized by everything from where they haunt, do they repeat the same actions over and over, and do they appear to have consciousness, or are they just, you know, just there walking through the, you know, walking up the stairs? Do they interact? Are they poltergeists and they hit people? So, what kind of ghosts do you put in your individual fiction? Alexia, I'll start with you this time, and tell us a little bit about the ghost that shows up for Gethsemane.
Well, my ghosts are ghosts with a consciousness, intelligent ghost.
Yes.
There's an official term for it, and I've seen on like 100 episodes of Ghost Adventures, and I can't think of it now. But basically, my ghost can interact intelligently with the living. Not every living person can see or hear them, but for the ones who can, they can have a conversation. And my main character, my sleuth, has frequent conversations with the ghost that happens to be living in her house, or to hear the ghost tell it she's living in his house.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I know. They get into quite a few arguments on that point. Amy, what about you? What kind of ghost do you use, or do you use a multiple ghosts in your story? Because there seems to be sort of ghost hunting vibe going through what you were describing.
That's what it is, ghost hunting. And it's mostly intelligent ghosts. The ghost in my first book, she's kind of a very vengeful spirit, going around killing people. And in my upcoming second book, I've got a few different types. But they've all been intelligent so far. So.
Gail, you have quite a variety of specters in your work, given the variety of the variety of the work. What do you gravitate towards, and why?
It all depends on the story. I mean, sometimes it's important to have the witness of a repeater, a ghost that no longer has any sentience or sense of self, but their image is trapped to repeat the same snippet like a piece of film. Sometimes also called a stone tape memory, where you see the person walk to the edge of the balcony, jump off, and then they come back and they do it all over again and again and again. Sometimes seeing that witness is important. Sometimes it's important to have a ghost who is sentient and can tell their story, or is vengeful, like Amy was saying. And sometimes it's great to have a ghost as a spy. In my Assassins of Landry series, they've got a ghost spy who works with them, and he's fully on board because he was kind of bored being dead. Usually there are a lot of limitations on whether or not they can affect the material world, kind of like the verb to Swayze something, as in Patrick Swayze from Ghost, to knock something. It's a supernatural reference, of course. Some of them have a limited amount of ability to do that. Others can't. Of course, anything like that takes a tremendous amount of energy. But it really depends on the story, because I think I've used pretty much all the types there are, depending on where they fit.
So it's plot driven as much as anything, not Would Alexia and Amy, would you say the same? That
yeah,
the ghost you chose was plot driven, or did the ghost come first?
No, mine was plot driven. I needed my ghost to be able to be an active participant in solving the mystery. So I had to make them intelligent. And then there are also my books have paranormal subplots that sometimes involve ghosts. And so I also needed those ghosts to be intelligent to drive the story.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I came up with the ghost first, and then the plot followed.
So you were looking for the ghost.
I was.
Okay. Colleen, what about you? You've got a spectrum, should I say, of ghosts with your
spectrum. Yeah. So each of the books in my series have a similar sort of feel to them. It's usually a woman. It's kind of like it's a modern Gothic. So it's a woman who's moving into an old house, getting an old shop, moving into, some entity that is haunted. And that ghost in that entity, it's different in each book. The woman is different in each book. The setup is different. It's in the same town. But the ghost is usually there, and they're restless for some reason because somebody killed them, or they have a message to give, or whatever. So the ghosts in my series don't converse with the people, but they can understand often what the other person, what the corporeal person is saying to them, and often can react. Sometimes they choose to, sometimes they don't. I have a ghost in my first book, Sinister Summer, who is using tarot cards and books to communicate with the amateur detective, or the woman who's moving into the house. She's throwing books off the shelf that are giving her clues as to what's going on. So my ghosts communicate in different ways. Sometimes we actually see like a light or a figure. Sometimes we just hear things, or there's wind and there's crazy stuff going on. So it's different, but they all kind of have a reason for being there and communicating. And then they eventually get put to rest. Traditional Gothic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you would say the ghosts are plot driven more than...
Yes, they're plot driven, and they're semi-intelligent. They are intelligent in the sense that they can hear and understand what's being said to them, and they have a reason to be there, but they're not going to talk to the person, at least not yet. I mean, I could write a ghost that talks. I haven't done that.
How much research did you do before you started writing your Sinister Shadows?
None. About ghosts? No, I just knew how, if really these were books I wrote because these are the kind of books I want to read, and I couldn't find them anywhere, with a good ghost story, kind of like Barbara Michaels, but with a little heavier romance and a little bit of sex. So really I just was writing about ghosts the way I envisioned them. You know, I probably was influenced by Scooby-Doo and the Three Investigators, which, by the way, Gail, I just have to say, there's not too many people who know these books, but I just am so happy that you know these. I bought these off eBay, these vintage books. They're the best. You guys, these are the best books. You're way too young. The other two are way too young to know them. And by the way, really quick question for the other two, for Alexia and Amy. Do you guys even know Ghost with Patrick Swayze? Like, do you know what she means by that? Okay.
Yeah,
I'm not that young.
You actually what, Alexia?
I actually saw it first run in the theater.
Oh, you.
So did I.
You look really super young, because I mean, okay, sorry. You might want to cut all that out, but I was just curious.
I mean, really, part of the most fun of these panels is when we start talking and come up with all sorts of amazing things. Gail, I know that you do some research, even if it's only to drag your family on every ghost tour on the East Coast.
On the East Coast and throughout Europe. One of the highlights of Rome was going down into that Capuchin crypt where they do all the decorating with bones. Somebody had a lot of time on their hands, but it was interesting. Didn't make it to the necropolis in Paris because we had less than a full day there, but it's on my bucket list. I love cemeteries. So, you know, you're really going to see that the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree. My mom was a school principal, and she always had to stay late after school to do grading and do stuff because she also taught. And it was a small town, and about 3 blocks away, there was a 150-year-old cemetery. And sure, go wander in the cemetery by yourself when you're 10. It was a different time. But I used to spend hours walking around this cemetery by myself. I was always safe. I never felt unsafe either from the dead or the living. But my game was to make up stories about the people who were buried there based on their headstone and their epitaph and the information that was carved on their stone. And figure out how I could tie all those things together, because when you really start looking at those headstones, there are questions and there's nobody around to ask. And you're wondering, how, why, wait, how do these dates match up? And so you just have to get creative about it. But I was always fascinated with the stories of these people who lived and laughed and loved. And now all that we have left of them, for all intents and purposes, is this stone with this cryptic marking on it. And that just fascinates me. So yeah, all of those things go together, and it's really no surprise that I write about vampires and ghosts and ghost hunters.
Alexia, what kind of research did you do? I mean, you live in the US. I think you started in Virginia, you wound up in Chicago, and then now you're on travel for graduate study. What kind of research did you do to set your series in Ireland? Did you go?
I actually went after my first book came out. That was actually my present to myself when my first book got published, was a trip to Ireland. And I had actually been one other time years and years and years before, but budget being what it was, most of my research was courtesy of Google, which you can find a surprising amount of information on. And then I subscribed to the Gaelic Athletic League sports channel. There are all sorts of Irish pronunciation guides. I could find the Irish school schedules and school menus online. Of course, there were tons and tons of pictures of Ireland online. So I found almost everything I need to be able to come up with at least a somewhat credible Irish setting. Now, granted, I made the village up so that no one could say, hey, Galway doesn't really look like that. Well, my town looks like it looks because I said so. But my research was virtual. Just I wish I had the time and money to go spend 6 months in Ireland researching, but that I'm not at that point yet.
With the ghosts, though, did you do that explains a lot about how you got to Ireland, but did you specifically research the kind of ghost, the housebound ghost, before you started, or did you just go with Scooby-Doo and Nancy Drew?
Actually, the ghosts I didn't have to search as much, just because I had years of reading ghost stories and watching horror movies, plus the stories that my mother had told about my grandparents. So I kind of had something to go on for that already. Mm-hmm. So once I decided what my ghost could and couldn't do, then that was easy, just to create that character without having to do as much research. So I was, getting the place right took more research than creating the ghost, just because I knew a lot more about ghosts than I did about Ireland.
Oh, okay. Amy, what about you? Did you research your ghost? Did you focus more on the research related to the setting and plotting of your book?
I've been to Asheville a few times. I went there for my honeymoon, so so that's where I got the setting. As far as the ghosts, I didn't do much research. I have these letters that my great aunt wrote telling me stories about my grandmother, and in it are several different ghost stories that my grandmother told her when she was a little girl. Now, my grandmother swore they were real, but we don't know if they were stories that were made up to scare her little sister, or if she actually saw the ghosts. But
cool.
But I used a lot of that.
Could you share one of those stories?
Well, the one that I remember the most is my grandmother. Now, she was several years older than my great aunt, and she told her a story of when she was a little girl. She woke up in the middle of the night and saw this man standing at the foot of her bed. And this man told her that she needed to follow him so that she could help him find his treasure buried under the stairs. And she ran out of the room. She did not go look for the treasure. She did not want to know any of that. But that was the one that I remember the most.
Cool. That's really something that you hear a lot of in fairy tales and other stories. There's very famous ghost stories all throughout even medieval literature that talk about apparitions at the foot of the bed saying, go dig under this tree.
Yeah.
That's really part and parcel of that heritage, that, that theme. Gail, you were about to say something when
I guess one of the other things about research is every time I sit down to do a book, especially a new series, I look at the location where it's set, and I really want the location to be as much a part of the book, as much of a character as possible, so that the story couldn't happen the same way anywhere else. Mm-hmm. And that means looking at what are the local haunted houses, what are the local legends and urban legends about ghost stories and murders and scandals and mine disasters and train wrecks and all those, major fires, all those calamities that would tend to trap a spirit. And then I do my very best where it's appropriate to the plot to weave those in. So that if somebody who, now most people reading it, if they're not familiar with the area, as long as it fits in the plot, goes right over their head, they go, oh, isn't that interesting? But I'm going to get the occasional person who goes, wow, I grew up there and I always heard about those stories. Or, yeah, my mom always told me about that ghost. And then it's this extra ring of truth that makes the story that much more special to somebody who does get the reference. So, yeah, for that, researching all of those kinds of things and those legends around a place is a big part of what I do when I'm working on a book.
Cool. Do you have a particular favorite ghost story that you've uncovered in your research that has the ring of truth to it?
There are a fair number where they aren't the big dramatic ones, but I was talking to a family member about visiting the Gettysburg area, and that I had wanted to go through the Jenny Wade house, but it was closed at the time. And she shuddered and said, I'll never go back there. There were people there. And what she didn't mean real people. She meant ghosts. She saw something that really spooked her. And this is not somebody who, you know, comes up with these kinds of things out of thin air. I could tell that it really bothered her. And that wasn't a big elaborate ghost story, but she saw something that she wasn't expecting to see and couldn't explain, and it bothered her years later.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm just going to jump in and say that that's part of when we're writing books, sometimes the subtlety is the best part. And that's such a subtle but very effective story. Like just that one line, I saw people there, there's people there, or whatever.
Yeah, the only experience I ever had, and it's not nearly as dramatic as all the great ghost stories I hear from people. I was driving around Bethany Cemetery in Charleston. I was in my car. There's very few people around, a couple people tending, you know, graves, but there weren't a lot of people around. I never got out of my van. I'm just driving around looking at all the markers. And I get to the edge of the cemetery, bright, sunny day, and there's this very old road. It looks like a maintenance road. Probably goes back to a shed where they keep the lawn equipment. It's along a tree row. And I was just going to do a loop and turn around. And as soon as I pulled on that road, I had the strongest feeling of not being welcome. And I swear I heard someone say, get out. And you can believe me, I got out. Yes, sir, I'm out of here.
That's what you do in Charleston if you hear a ghost yelling at you. You get out.
And that's not exciting compared to what other people say. I didn't see anybody. I didn't, you know, have things fall at my car. But that's the only time something like that ever happened to me. But wow, was it memorable. I wasn't going to stick around and buck the system.
No, I can imagine not. Colleen, did you ever have, you know, an experience like that, or did you ever hear any really good stories?
Well, two really quick, I'll make it quick. One, the only time I ever actually maybe had an experience was when my husband and I were first together. We lived in half of a big old farmhouse in Pennsylvania, and then the other half was our landlord and lady, and they were older. And the husband died while we were still living there. And not long after he died, I came down the stairs in our half of the house, and I just had the sense of his presence. Joe, his name was Joe Parenti. And I was like, I just felt like he was there. And then I didn't feel him or see him. I felt him, but I didn't really know. And then like not long after, I was talking to my soon to be husband, and he mentioned that same thing, having that same sense. So independently, we both felt it in the same place at around the same time. So that kind of confirmed it for me. But my friend who I mentioned earlier, who's had several stories, this is a really good one, I think. She had it was her, either her uncle or her father, somebody who was in hospital and in hospice, not at her house for a long time. And he wore these slippers, these buckskin slippers. And he died, and they, you know, took all the stuff out of the hospital or whatever. And one day she came home to her house, and those buckskin shoes were in her house. And there was no way they would have gotten there any other way. Those buckskin shoes were in her house. And I was like, ooh. So, you know, stuff like that. You know, that's a very benign thing. It was almost like he was saying yes, you know. But anyway, that's it. I haven't had the scary things. But yours, Gail, that would have been creepy and fun and scary.
Yeah.
Okay. Alexia, what about you? Do you know of any really good real life ghost stories, or do we want to go straight to the fictional stuff?
Well, the ones my mom have told me, like, you know, one was when she and her sister they're probably elementary school age. They had gone out with grandma somewhere. They lived on, they actually grew up as sharecroppers. They lived out on some, you know, remote farmhouse in South Carolina on a tobacco farm. And they had gone to town or something. And then when they came home, and they went up to the farmhouse door and couldn't open it. You know, grandma tried and the door was like locked or barred. Grandma, being a sensible woman, thought that perhaps an intruder was in the house, so she was smart enough not to force her way in. She waited for Granddad to get home and get his shotgun.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
wise woman, yes.
Yes. So I said, she's a very level-headed, sensible person. So Granddad did come home. You know, she explained what was going on. She got a shotgun. Now, you know, Ma and her sister and Grandma had waited near the house the whole time, though. So if someone had run out, they would have seen them run out.
Right.
So, you know, so Grandpa goes up to the house, you know, shotgun at the ready to take care of whoever's broken into his home. Door swings wide open. Nobody's inside the house. They don't know what happened. But, you know, there was no evidence of any human intruder. It's just all of a sudden this door that, you know, wouldn't open to save someone's life just swings right open as soon as Grandpa gets home, and no one had come in and out of the house at the meantime. So, you know, again, that's not super, you know, it's not evil voices telling somebody to get out, but it's the little things like that. It's like, well, okay, maybe I can't just reject this whole ghost thing out of hand because something happened that wasn't normal. And it happened to people that I believe. So there must, you know, something's going on.
Going on. I have no idea myself. I mean, this is the sort of thing where you wonder what's going on in the house that you can't open the door because it doesn't seem to have a logical explanation. But, you know, what it is going on, you know, are the fairies having a party and they didn't want anybody to be there? You know, are the ghosts checking because they lost their keys and they don't want any humans flat-footing it throughout the house to, you know, do it? You don't know. And you don't know if there's a logical explanation. But, you know, I think that it's interesting that, you know, in all cultures, you have these stories of things coming back or doing things that are inexplicable, whether it be a voice that says, get out, and you go, or whether it's the guy at the foot of the bed. You know, that's the classic thing specters see. Now, there are some ghost stories that they do have an explanation for. There's something called a Kaushmar, which is basically the sleeping ghost, where you are in bed and you feel like something's sitting on your chest and you can't move. And it's a neurological thing that happens when you sleep too long in a specific position. And it's going to happen. And these things are attested to throughout history. But some of this other stuff, you wonder, what's going on here? It's not, don't know, but it's fascinating, you know? And, I don't even know that the best ghost hunters can actually find out, because I'm not sure it's happening at a level where the machines can pick it up myself. So, but that doesn't mean the stories aren't great. So we've talked a little bit about, you know, your real life ghost stories, and I appreciate that you've all shared them. Let's go in a different direction now, because, you know, August is one of the months of ghosts. The Japanese call it Bon. It's the festival of the returning ancestors. And so let's go with the stories. You know, what is your favorite fictional story. It can be a movie, it can be a short story, it can be a novel. What, if you were to give somebody a book that wasn't yours and say, this is Ghost, what would be the book? So, Alexia, why don't you start off with that one?
Well, if I had to give them a classic book, I would give them a collection of M.R. James short stories.
Okay.
Because I love his ghost stories, especially A Whistle and I'll Come to You, My Lad. If I had to give them a more recent book, I'd probably give them Coyote Songs by Gabino Iglesias.
Okay.
Because that's, if you like your ghosts mixed with revenge fiction, that's the one to go with. And if I had to tell them to watch a movie, I'd probably tell them to watch the 1960 3 version of The Haunting.
Oh yeah.
Based on the Shirley Jackson story.
Mm-hmm.
Novel.
Yeah, Shirley Jackson's haunted even without ghosts. Amy, what about you?
One book that I loved that had a ghost in it was Anna Dressed in Blood. It's a YA, and it's about a kid who has a knife that he inherited from his father, and it will destroy ghosts.
Oh.
And he goes after one of the deadliest called Anna Dressed in Blood, but she is not totally what she seems.
Oh yeah, they never are. They never are. Gail, what about you? What would be your recommendation for fictional ghost stories? It can be movies, it can be TV, it can be, and supernatural is off the table.
Jean Marie knows me.
Good show though.
Kind of my obsession. I think one of my favorite ghost stories of all time, and it was YA before there was YA, before there was a category, is a book called Jane Emily by Patricia Clapp. And it is about a young girl who comes to live with her aunt and finds out, she starts having these dreams and these strange things happen, and it turns out that she's being influenced, and the ghost really ultimately wants to possess her to come back to life. And it's this very willful young girl who died, and her spirit is haunting the gazing ball in the garden. And I have never looked at a gazing ball quite the same way after I read that book. And I read this when I was, 10 or 11. But it just, whether it was the book that hit me at exactly the right age, that is always the first one that I go back to. For movies, I like things that are less of the jump scare and the blood and the horror than the suspense. So, and I was just trying to Google it. I don't have the correct name for it, I'm sure. But there was a Daniel Radcliffe movie, I think the Woman in Black.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Very suspenseful, out on the English moors, lots of fog, deserted house, and an old family scandal. And of course, nothing ever goes right with those kinds of things. Those are my kind of favorite movies. I love the Vincent Price ones. I all of those where you're watching and you're going, yeah, this could happen.
Yep, it could. Colleen, what's your favorite fictional ghost story?
I don't like those really creepy ones with the possession. I like a little more benign ghosts. So I'm like my favorite ones would be like a Barbara Michaels book, like Witch, or Someone in the House, or Wait for What Will Come.
Oh,
and
I love Wait for What Will Come.
I know, they're all so good. And The Crying Child, oh my God, classic. My series, my Wicks Hollow series, is an homage to Barbara Michaels' books. I just love those because they're not, the ghosts can be mean and vindictive, but they're not possessing. Well, they do actually. I don't know. I just like those the best. I don't read Stephen King. I don't watch horror movies. I think I read the Amityville Horror when it first came out back when I was in high school, which gives you a date here, which scared the crap out of me. So no, none of that. I like gentle hauntings, I guess. I don't know. So Witch, Someone in the House, Wait for What Will Come, The Crying Child, those by Barbara Michaels are like the epitome of my favorite kind of ghost stories. And also back in like must have been the early 90s, I think it was, Antoinette Stockenberg had written about 4 or 5 novels that are similar in vein to what I write, which is murder, murder, romance, and ghost. And those books are still available, and I really like those as well. So I'm a little more benign. I'm just not as hardcore, I guess. I
kind of liked Amy Come Home from Barbara.
Yes, well, that was and then one of them was the sequel. There was Amy Come Home, Shattered Silk, and then they all kind of went together. Anyway, any Barbara Michaels book is brilliant. Many of them have real ghosts. So
yeah, and some of them are taken from local places. Yeah. So okay, go ahead.
I love the Pepper Martin mysteries that are set in Cleveland. She's a cemetery tour guide who hits her head, and now she sees ghosts, and they ask her to be their private detective and solve their murders. And Mary Stanton's series, there are only about 6 books in it, but she ends up becoming the lawyer for the dead. And it's wonderful, and it's creepy, and it's got such a great vibe. But they're not the super bloody, scary kind. So that's
I might be able to get behind those.
Mm-hmm. They're more.
It sounds like everybody writes books that I could read because none of them are like too creepy. Mm-hmm. But I have a quick question, Alexia. In your series, is it the same ghost in every book, or do you have more than one ghost?
The recurring character is the same ghost, but other ghosts come in.
Okay.
To form the paranormal.
And it's around music. Your series is around music. Okay. And then Amy, you've got one book out and one coming.
Yes.
And is that the same ghost?
No, it's going to be different ghosts each time.
And I know Gail has
a different main character each time.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to clarify so that for the watchers and for myself, because I always got to add to my list of books to read.
So it's bloodless.
Okay, bloodless is good. No possessions. I don't like possessions. I don't like, ooh.
No.
Oh my God. So really quick, Poltergeist, the movie. Okay, I was babysitting. I was in high school, maybe middle. I must have been in like young high school. I don't remember when it came out. I was babysitting by myself, obviously by myself, at night, and made the mistake of watching Poltergeist.
Ooh.
Really a bad move. That's probably why I'm scared crapless out of all these really scary, like, possessive ghosts. And then I think I read Amityville Horror shortly after. It was very bad. Yeah,
I'm still terrified of Poltergeist to this day.
Sorry.
Of course, I was a kid when it came out, so no.
Yeah, I was probably babysitting you. Oh.
Following up Poltergeist with Amityville Horror, the only thing you would have needed to make the trifecta there would have been Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You would have been done.
Well, and then I did go see, this is horror, not ghosts, but I did go see Nightmare on Elm Street, like at the midnight movie when I was in college. Really, like, it just ruined me. And I never read a Stephen King book in my life. I'm too afraid to. Like, I'm a wimp, man. My ghosts have to be like, whatever. They can't be me.
Same.
They can be trying to get their point across, right, Amy? Like,
yes,
they
exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Nora Roberts has some gentle ghosts in her books.
Oh, she does, like Midnight Bayou. Actually, that's a good one. Midnight Bayou is a good Nora Roberts tribute. Both of those are also really good ghost stories without being too, but that's kind of like what mine feel like. Yeah. Like the Nora's Midnight Bayou or tribute. They're very,
And E.J. Cooperman writes a series with a ghostly private investigator. So does Stuart Jaffe. There are a number of ghostly private investigators out there. And those are fun and usually adhere very much to the whole cozy mystery thing of no blood, no on-screen, murder, nothing too bad.
There's actually...
Go ahead, Alexia, sorry.
There's actually an entire subgenre of cozy mysteries called paranormal cozies. And so a lot of those have ghosts, but they don't have the blood and nobody gets.
And they don't have the hot sex, which is why mine don't fit in paranormal cozy.
True, they don't have the hot sex because
they don't. I mean, they have the hot sex. Mine are like the Nora Roberts books. They don't have the hot sex, but they have they don't have the real blood or gore or possession. So I don't fit anywhere.
You don't close the door, yes.
I don't close the door, but it's not like an erotic novel. There's like one sex scene in each.
They have more plot than sex, yes, I know.
It's like 1 cup of murder, 1 cup of romance, and 1 cup of ghost. So we have 3 cups.
That's kind of like mine too.
We're all separated at birth, clearly. We all read the same books, we all watch the same TV, except you guys are watching some other stuff I don't watch.
So the rest falls away got me through chemo. So
well, good. Gail, I have 2 things I wanted to mention that you said earlier. You went have you been to the Jack the Ripper ghost tour in London?
Oh, absolutely.
Us too.
Signed up for that one.
She wouldn't have missed it. And if she did, her son would have dragged her.
Yeah. But the other question is, or statement more of, I was just in Rome last fall and I went to the crypt with all the bones, which, oh my God, if anybody gets there, but I could feel the energy the minute I walked in. Like, I'm not psychic, but I do feel, oh my God, just walking through there, you could just feel the energy of all of these dead people. It's like they use bones to decorate the entire crypt, like all these crypts. It's creepy and macabre and wild. Anyway, I'm assuming you felt the energy there.
I'm walking around going, oh, that's really kind of cool in a creepy way. They made a chandelier out of like finger bones. And my husband and my middle daughter, who have a fair amount of sensitivity, are like hanging on to each other going, oh God, Mom, get us out of here. Or they're just kind of, moving along like, we let her talk her into this again. And I'm just, taking in the scenery. So, no, I'm sorry. I'm still mostly oblivious to that sort of thing. But I do have a couple of people in my family who ground me with that. Like, they wouldn't let me go driving around the grounds at Gettysburg at dusk, even though the gates were open for a while. They went, are you friggin' nuts? We're not going to drive around the most haunted site on the East Coast at dusk.
In the country, probably. Well, you mentioned also that you used to hang around in cemeteries. I'm just wondering if my other co-authors, co-panelists did, because when I grew up, there was a cemetery like a block from my little teeny neighborhood that I lived in that I could walk to. And I used to hang out there all the time. I wasn't doing the cool things like you were doing and making up stories, but it was peaceful. It didn't scare me. It didn't bother me, but I liked to be there. And I just wondered if Amy and Alexia were drawn to cemeteries too.
Not when I was a kid, but when I moved to Charleston, when I married my husband, we went through some of the cemeteries there, and they were very nice, actually.
Spoken like a true ghostwriter.
Yeah,
Alexia, how about you?
Yes, I've always been drawn to cemeteries. I actually just went through one a couple days ago up near Trinity Church here in Newport, Rhode Island, where the headstones date back to like the 1700s, which fascinates me. It's like that's been there since 17 something. And but yeah, any chance. I haven't been into the ones in New Orleans just because I was warned that the living are the ones you have to worry about, and those cemeteries are not the safest places to hang out. But usually, especially in churchyards, and I don't go. We went to Key West, and my friends went like water skiing, and I went to the old Key West cemetery to spend the day there. My friends got sunburned, I didn't, so I.
Hey, everybody gets sunburned in Florida sooner or later. It really happens. It really does. Okay, this has been a lot of fun, and thank you for sharing your stories with me. So I'm going to ask everybody if you've got any final remarks on the subject of ghosts. Colleen?
Just that I like the idea of ghosts. I don't want them to be too scary, but it's okay if they're restless, as long as we can fix things for them. That's kind of the modus operandi for my books. They can be scary and mad. They might even be murderous, but eventually they're gonna, relax so that we can turn the big house into a bed and breakfast, and we can open the antique shop without people being worried that ghosts are gonna get them when they come in. So that's kind of the modus operandi for my books.
Okay. Amy, final remarks?
Well, I always keep in mind what a friend told me is, you really shouldn't be afraid of ghosts because they were once just people. So
that's a good
so
point.
That's kind of the way I'm going in with my books, is that they were once just people. So you just kind of have to figure out why they're mad.
Okay. Yeah. Gail?
Yeah, on the Gail Z. Martin and Gail and Larry Ann Martin side of things, our ghosts go from funny to really spooky to really spooky. So we kind of have a whole range there. And on the Morgan Bryce side, same thing with range, but with hot sex.
Yeah. And Alexia, any final remarks?
My ghosts run to the, if you like the Ghost of Mrs. Muir, you'd probably like my ghost. My ghost runs to the funny and snarky, but there's not really, yeah, there are dead bodies because it's a murder mystery, but there's no blood or gore or anything like that's gonna, give you nightmares for a week or anything like that. So.
And nobody gets killed who doesn't deserve it, right?
Right.
Okay. Where can folks find you on the web? Alexia?
You can find me on Facebook. I think it's Alexia Gordon Writer. I'm on Instagram as Dr. Lex 1995 and Twitter as @AlexiaGordon.
And your website?
AlexiaGordon.net.
Cool. Amy?
My website is amyravenell.com. You can find me on Facebook as Amy Ravenell, and on Instagram as Amy Ravenell, and on Twitter as Amy Rav.
Great. Great. Colleen?
I'm everywhere as ColleenGleason.com, on Twitter, on Facebook, everywhere.
Okay. And Gail?
I'm on Twitter and I'm on Twitter and Facebook and most other places as Gail Z Martin. You just need to remember the Z. That's the important part. If it's not Gail Z Martin, it's GZ Martin. Website is gailzmartin.com. And as Morgan Bryce, that's BRICE, morganbryce.com, Morgan Bryce author on Twitter, and you catch the drift.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you again for joining us. And thank you in the audience for joining us at the writing track here at Continual. If you enjoyed what you saw, please like, share, follow, and subscribe. And allow yourself to be haunted.